My name is Dr. Robin Goldstein, and I'm here today to talk about the power of an image. The idea that an image, such as this one, is capable of evoking a change in the way we understand science is not new. That it is quite ancient, though not well understood, seems to be. That this shift in our understanding of science requires a change in the way in which we present our original findings from here on is my own idea of how we retain enough of the memory of what we have thus far accomplished and continue to honor those individuals and people by name who made it possible. We were informed by Comte of Italy's genius for art, and in the way that Freud left the facts to be determined of Last's apparent understanding of the eternal city of Rome's checkered past, a need on the part of its citizenry to feel protected as much from within, from external enemies, as from without, by way of the 10 hills that provided their escape to freedom from time to time. Italy's genius was affirmed not just by an original idea, which inwardly or from within served their need to live on into eternity, but also externally or from without, by hills fortified for that purpose. 10 to be precise, in the sense the two numbers of 1 and 0, when joined, are capable of running on and on into infinity, like every perfect storm. Similarly, we were informed by Robert Merton and Eleanor Barber of the circumstances that led Horace Walpole to coin the very but not altogether expressive words serendipity for the making of a critical discovery, whether in science or outside, in a way that left open the difference of the fine line of the 2 points that Max Weber discovered, and one bit of understanding that Talcott Parsons left out. Of course, there was the matter of why Venice was the place where the Capello family coat of arms, or family crest, attained a certain significance as the source for Walpole's finding. Robert Merton's understanding that serendipity should not be misconstrued as only attributable to science, and my own of how the Chinese, by way of their joining the arts and crafts, contributed to such a development. Weber refers to the second set of newcomers to Rome as stemming from Indo-European stock, allowing for the inference that he had reason to think that they were not the first, consistent with the fact that the image of the god of heaven and the first one of the emperors of China as his son, in the way that it resembled Zeus, was suggestive of the likelihood that the first set of newcomers were of Chinese origin. In that sense, Last's Cambridge History of Rome was correct to point out that there are certain facts of Rome's history, while having no specific bearing on Rome's development, cannot be ignored, leaving to be explained not only how China, upon its failure to eliminate the threat of anarchy, developed to an extent unknown elsewhere, and why Chinese history and intellectual development has remained possibly stifled by fear, by the threat that freedom poses, but also of why both China and Italy were of interest to both Weber and to Freud, as far as the difference between the East and the West were concerned. Last admits that the story of Rome at the time and thus far was the stuff of legends, some of which were of Roman origins, but all of which contained a bit of truth, consistent with Weber's understanding of the one legend of unlimited toleration that in the Chinese state, as intolerant as it was of any and all forms of rebellion, in the sense that every rebellious expression was connected with heresy or a violation of tradition and in violation of the advice of ancestors, supposedly responsible for the founding of the empire state organization. Or as Weber put it, the religious edicts of emperors made the persecution of heresy a duty. But it also made the protection of which democracy grants to the individual, and particularly to women, seem unnecessary, and real progress therefore impossible on the scientific front, Consistent with Weber's understanding of the division of labor between the man making the wholes and the woman dropping the seeds of the ideas as basic to science and the starting point of China's development, in the sense of Weber's understanding that the military organization of the bachelor house came first or preceded all other forms of organization in the region, including the extended family or clan organization, thanks to the introduction of the role of ancestral spirits attributable to a woman of African origin. Now, I know some of you must be thinking, culture wars. To be sure, I'm not. Rome and Venice qualify as a few of the places where Italy's creative genius came to be expressed. That Freud performed a few tests to see for himself is consistent with what Comte regarded as the natural aptitude that Germans showed for systematic generalization and his understanding of the French penchant for originality, for bringing their philosophical and political superiority to the fore in a way that would have been impossible in the absence of the Spanish influence, their combined sense of personal dignity and high regard for universal brotherhood. Indeed, it must be said here and now that America's emphasis upon equality of opportunity, as somewhat derivative of the earnest predilection of the British for reality and utility, and Stephen Hawking's further thinking on the subject of essentials, serves as this sociologist's starting point for this essay. It is in this context that Freud's text of the psychopathology of everyday life reminds us not only of the value of memory, of the mind as incapable of forgetting, but also of the importance of remembering. That the more but not altogether general problem of preservation allows for the inference of the sphere of the mind as having a particular side to its development, and one that Weber was able to trace back to China as far as Rome and Venice were concerned, and in a way that prompted Freud to admit that the subject of preservation, when it comes to the mind, has hardly at all been studied, but enough to qualify Weber as Freud's particular reference point here, in the sense in which Parsons qualifies as Freud's general point of reference, and Du Bois was Parsons' own. Forgetting as the way in which the mind protects itself can be just as much of a disturbance to scientific enterprise as vanity, or the need to stand in the foreground. The deliberate act of not identifying one's reference points or sources by name, respecting the right of privacy of those who wish to remain in the background or anonymous, is another. The power of such an image to preserve in a variety of ways what we have learned about and from one another should never be discounted. Thank you.